Hello and welcome to the viewers of this video. This is the Orange Fan here, bringing you another entry for the episode Recap and Thoughts category. This video will be dedicated to episode 35 of Codename Cadets Next Door, Operation Graduates. We begin this episode at the Cadets Next Door moon base, where we see that many of the Cadets Next Door operatives have gathered together for a ceremony. Number 362, who has now become the supreme leader of the organization after number 274's betrayal, is giving a speech that reveals that this is the graduation ceremony for the Cadets Next Door. And yes, Tommy Gilligan, Sonia, and Lee are three of the Cadets Next Door operatives who will eventually graduate to Kids Next Door operatives. Sonia, however, notices that Tommy seems to be troubled by something, and she inquires him about it. Tommy admits that he's disappointed that his older brother, number 2, and the rest of the Sector V operatives are not present for the graduation ceremony. Tommy and Sonia, however, are interrupted by their conversation when they overhear number 362 mention that they can't officially continue the graduation ceremony because they don't have the Kids Next Door code module. As it was mentioned in previous entries, the Kids Next Door code module is a device that contains information on all of the Kids Next Door operatives. It's also the device that allows new operatives to join the organization. But because of the events of Operation Slumber, the Kids Next Door no longer have the code module. However, all 5 Sector V operatives suddenly arrive on the moon base. They all look very injured, but they have the code module in hand. They comment about having to fight the delightful children from down the lane, but in the end, they proved victorious, and they have the code module once again. They hand the code module over to number 362, who is pleased with Sector V's efforts, and number 362 places the code module onto a pedestal, and she decides that the first cadet to formally enter the Kids Next Door will be Tommy Gilligan. Tommy gives a speech about how he does vow to uphold what it means to be a Kids Next Door operative, and number 362 instructs Tommy to place his genetic identification within the code module. Tommy sticks his finger up his nose, pulls out a booger, and places the booger into the code module, and he says he wants his code name or designated number to be number T, which confuses many of the operatives present, and one of the operatives actually makes fun of Tommy by saying T isn't a number. But Tommy is still insistent on being number T, and it turns out both the code module and the computer for the organization as a whole both accept number T as Tommy's code name or designated number. So number 362 formally welcomes number T into the Kids Next Door, and Tommy proceeds to give his thanks to all who are present and were supportive of his efforts to become a Kids Next Door operative. However, none of the Kids Next Door operatives on the moon base realize that they're being watched. We soon see Father in one of the chambers of his mansion, and Father is, somehow Father was able to send a camera to the moon base so he can watch the graduation ceremony. Father recognizes Tommy as one of the Cadets Next Door that stopped his plans from Operation Training, but he's actually pleased to see that Tommy has now officially joined the Kids Next Door because he says Tommy will now get to join the organization in its destruction. Father is also in the room with the delightful children from down the lane and a dog that bears a strong resemblance to the dog disguise that some of the Kids Next Door operatives wore in Operation Trip. Father refers to the dog as Fane, but Father is preparing something. He starts to play the organ that's in the room, and when Father plays the organ, it's attached to this sphere on a table in the middle of this room, and the sphere starts to light up, and it looks like yes, this organ is how Father activates this sphere device. But before anything else can happen, the device suddenly stops, or it no longer lights up. And Father notices that Fane is messing with the wiring of the device for one reason or another. Fane tries to run away, but Father chases after Fane, scolding the dog. But as Father grabs Fane by the tail to keep Fane from running, Fane still tries to run, but Father soon realizes he's actually holding a dog costume. Yes, like Operation Trip, Fane is actually a disguise for a Kids Next Door operative. Well, in Operation Trip, it was 2 operatives, but in this episode, Fane is really just a single Kids Next Door operative in disguise. And the Kids Next Door operative is understandably scared that Father has now seen through the disguise, and Father tells the operative that he has made a grave mistake or something along those lines. Back at the Kids Next Door moon base, we see that the graduation ceremony has all finished up now. So all the cadets are now Kids Next Door operatives, and now they're having the party to celebrate the new Kids Next Door operatives. Oh, that's right. Now that I think about it, besides being number T, Tommy has now been appointed to being part of Sector V. So that means Tommy is part of the same sector as number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, and number 5. So Tommy is excited about how he gets to stay in the treehouse with the rest of the Sector V operatives. And most of the Sector V operatives don't seem to share the same enthusiasm as Tommy does. Suddenly, though, during the party, a Kids Next Door operative tries to contact all the operatives at the party. This is the same operative who was disguised as a dog in Father's mansion. The operative is revealed to be number 88, and number 88 tries to tell all the operatives that Father's latest weapons device is fully operational now, but before he can tell them anything else, his voice suddenly seems to be... his voice is interrupted, and instead all they hear are hear a rooster crowing. That's right. His voice is interrupted by the sounds of a rooster crowing, and yes, but they did hear the important part. Father's latest device is fully functional now. So number 362 instructs all the Kids Next Door operatives present to storm Father's mansion. She wants Sector V's operatives to be in the same vehicle as her. But yes, we see all of the Kids Next Door operatives on the moon base preparing for their latest mission. So they all get into various 2x4 technology vehicles, and they all head for Father's mansion. The Kids Next Door waste no time in trying to attack Father's mansion with their various weapons, but Father's mansion has some defense mechanisms in place and has weapons of their own to counter. The mansion has its own weapons to counter, and an army of suits of armor. They bear a strong resemblance to Sir Toasty from Operation Lice, from what I've observed. But yes, there's an army of suits of armor that are coming out of the mansion to fight the Kids Next Door operatives. So some of the operatives are still in their 2x4 technology vehicles. Some of them actually take to the ground to fight the suits of armor. So in the vehicle that number 362 and the Sector V operatives are in, however, number 362 is explaining to the Sector V operatives that number 88 was investigating a rumor about Father's latest weapons device that he was hooking up to his mansion. Number 1 suspects that Father's latest device involves changing the ages of the Kids Next Door operatives into adults, and number 362 agrees with number 1's suspicions. So she says that she wants the Sector V operatives to not take any risks and use their birthday suits when they infiltrate the mansion. Tommy, however, takes the term birthday suit too literally, to say the least. Number 2 has to explain to his younger brother that in the Kids Next Door organization, birthday suits are devices used to create a force field that protects the one wearing the device from being affected by age-changing rays. So number one, however, points out that they didn't have enough time to create a birthday suit for Tommy, so they have to, so just the 5 of them, the main 5 Sector V operatives, are the only ones that are going to infiltrate Father's mansion. They tell Tommy to just, to keep an eye out for anything else as they head off into the mansion. So that just leaves number 362 with Tommy, and Tommy, Tommy hasn't had a chance to put his clothes back on yet, so yeah, the rather embarrassed number 362 politely says that she's going to help the troops on the ground. So yeah, she politely says bye to number T, although she's clearly embarrassed, understandably so. And Tommy puts his clothes back on, but he's grumbling to himself about being left out on the action because he's just graduated. But he decides he's going to follow the rest of the Sector V operatives anyway because he thinks he might be able to save the day like he did in Operation Training. So back in Father's mansion, Father's security cameras show the Sector V operatives going down one of the hallways. And Father is actually pleased to see this. He says he intends to give Sector V all of his attention for his latest plan. So when he turns away to look at the delightful children, he doesn't see that Tommy's on the security cameras now going through the halls, but Father isn't looking at the cameras when Tommy is on the security cameras, so Father doesn't know about Tommy being in the mansion too. But Father tells the delightful children to oversee the battle, or he says something along those lines while he focuses on Sector V. So the delightful children follow Father's instructions, and eventually the Sector V operatives do come across Father in his room, or the room that Father is in right now. And Tommy is about to head into the room as well, but Father closes up all the doors to keep the Sector V operatives from escaping. But Tommy can still look through a keyhole through one of the doors. He looks through the keyhole so he can see what's going on. And Father says he's glad that they've arrived at his mansion because he wants to show them up close something that will change their lives forever. Or that's along the lines of how Father words it anyway. So Father starts to play the organ, and this activates the sphere device on the table in the middle of the room. And it looks like a yellow force field is expanding from this device, and it's starting to cover the room slowly but steadily. Thinking that this is an age-changing ray, the Sector V operatives activate their birthday suits, and they brag about how they were prepared for Father's actions. Father compliments them for their efforts, but he says that he'd be more impressed, or he would actually be impressed with their contingency plans if his plan was turning them into adults. And this catches the Sector V operatives by surprise. They question what is the device for if it's not an age-changing ray. But the force field starts to, the force field, number 5 is now within range of the force field because of it continuing to expand. And number 5's birthday suit is destroyed. And number 5 actually turns into a gazelle. And yes, this device actually is an animalization ray. That's what they call it. It changes people into animals. And Father comments that there was no way, Father says that he wouldn't want the kids next door to join him in what he calls glorious adulthood. And as the animalization ray's force field expands, more of the Sector V operatives are turned into animals. So number 4 is turned into a koala. Number 3 is turned into a crane. Number 2 is turned into a hippo. And number 1 tries to fight back. He throws whatever, because that's right, their weapons were destroyed by Father when they first entered the room. I should mention that. And so number 1 is trying to fight Father using whatever item he can find as an improvised weapon and trying to avoid the force field. But Father's able to easily counter number 1's attacks. And eventually the force field expands enough so number 1 is hit by the force field and he turns into a seal. and Tommy is horrified to see this as Father continues to let out an evil laugh as he continues to play the organ. Tommy attempts to escape from the force field when it expands beyond Father's room, and eventually Tommy runs into the delightful children while he's trying to escape. And Tommy thinks he can trick the delightful children into being hit by the force field, but when the force field hits the delightful children, they're unaffected by it. The delightful children gloat about how Father had set the animalization ray so that only Kids Next Door operatives are affected by the animalization ray. Tommy questions how it can tell the difference, but the delightful children are like, what does it matter? Father thought of everything. That's all that matters. Or they say something along those lines. And so Tommy tries to escape from the expanding force field while the rest of the Kids Next Door operatives outside are still trying to fight off the army of suits of armor and the weapons from the mansion. Tommy is able to eventually escape the mansion, and he's trying to get away from the force field, but number 86 stops him, not seeing the force field, and she thinks that Tommy is just nervous because it's his first day as a Kids Next Door graduate. But Tommy's trying to explain to her about the force field, but he's saying it in a very chaotic and frantic way, so number 86 doesn't really catch what he's saying. And eventually the force field expands enough so number 86 is hit with the animalization ray force field. So number 86 turns into a dog, and some Kids Next Door operatives say something along the lines of, that figures. So the rest of the Kids Next Door operatives try to escape, but the force field keeps expanding, so they keep turning into animals. At one point, number 362 has fallen to the ground, and her legs are covered with the force field, but Tommy is able to pull her out of the force field, so the top half of number 362 is not affected by the force field. Only her lower half was hit by the force field. So the rest of the Kids Next Door operatives are forced to retreat. And Father sees this on his security cameras, but he's laughing that the Kids Next Door are forced to flee. So the remaining Kids Next Door operatives return to the moon base, and they have to think of a plan because they see the force field has expanded to cover the entire Earth, and it's even going as far as to cover space as well, which means eventually the force field is going to reach the moon base one way or another. So they need to think of something to stop or protect themselves from the force field, or else they won't be able to do anything about it. One of the Kids Next Door operatives suggests that they modify the birthday suits so the force field will cause an immunity to the animalization ray force field. And number 362 figures it's better than doing nothing. And we do see that number 362's lower half is now monkey legs, and she has a monkey tail now. And there's another Kids Next Door operative who has hooves for arms now. But yes, the Kids Next Door operatives turn the remaining birthday suits into, or they modify them so that they'll work against the animalization ray's force field. But Tommy notices he's not being included with the operatives returning to Earth. Number 362 explains that they only have so many birthday suits, and she says that with the limited birthday suits that they have, she wants to make sure all the experienced or the most experienced of the remaining operatives are the ones that get the birthday suits because of how crucial that this mission is. So Tommy and presumably the other new Kids Next Door operatives won't be joining in on this on the remainder of this mission. So number 362 and the other experienced Kids Next Door operatives head back into their 2x4 technology vehicles, and they head back to Earth. They activate the birthday suits just before they enter the force field of the animalization ray. And when they enter the force field, it looks like everything's fine, but suddenly the force fields of the birthday suits are destroyed and everyone turns into animals anyway. And yes, number 362 is now fully a monkey now. Before she fully turns into a monkey, number 362 pieces together that the animalization ray's force field changed frequency to counter the modified birthday suits. But yes, the experienced Kids Next Door operatives are now animals, and Tommy sees the force field getting closer to the moon base. Tommy tries to stay calm, saying how the Kids Next Door never quit. But then he thinks to himself, what if they did? Or he says something along those lines anyway. So back at the mansion, yes, back at Father's mansion, the delightful children are congratulating Father for the success of his plan. And Father and the delightful children let out evil laughs over how the Kids Next Door have been defeated. But then Father tells the delightful children to head to the dungeon where the animals are being kept. Because in Father's word, he wants them to clean up because Father says in his words that the mansion smells like a poo museum. So the delightful children go off to do that, and Father goes on a rant about kids wanting pets but never cleaning up after pets. But then Father notices that the pooper scooper and the pail are still in the room that he's in. So he instructs the delightful children to return into the room. There's a bit of a delay, but when the delightful children return, they're now sheep. And Father doesn't understand how this happens, how it happened. But then Tommy appears, and he's not affected by the animalization ray force field. Tommy explains that he figured out that Father wanted to steal the code module in the first place so he could modify it so that it would be in sync with his animalization ray device. So, because yes, the code module knows all the Kids Next Door operatives, so that way, by modifying it to be in sync with the animalization ray would only turn Kids Next Door operatives into animals and no one else. And Tommy actually quit the Kids Next Door. He took his booger out of the code module, so that's why he's unaffected by the animalization ray. And he put the boogers of the delightful children into the code module so that they would be considered Kids Next Door operatives, and thus they would be affected by the animalization ray as well. So Tommy is hoping that Father will turn off the ray to get his kids back to normal, even if it means having to turn off the device for the rest of the Kids Next Door as well. But Father actually decides, nah, he's not going to do that. He thinks that the sheep transformation is actually an improvement because he admits that he finds the delightful children annoying from time to time. Tommy can only say that Father truly is evil, and Father does not disagree with this. He's about to attack Tommy with a fireball, but Tommy makes a run for it, and Father furiously chases after Tommy. But then the animalized Sector V operatives do manage to slow Father down long enough for Tommy to get a head start so he can head to the dungeon. Father eventually overpowers the animalized Sector V operatives, and he says he's going to finish things with Tommy once and for all. In the dungeon, Tommy is able to free all of the animalized Kids Next Door operatives in their pens, and they all escape. But before Tommy can leave, Father enters the dungeon, and he pins Tommy against the wall of one of the pens, saying that he won't let who he calls the runt of the litter humiliate him. But then Tommy interrupts Father, and he actually picks Father's nose, and he puts Father's booger into the code module, thus turning Father into a Kids Next Door operative, which turns Father into an animal, in his case a panther. Tommy locks Father up in one of the pens, and then he, with the animalized Sector V operatives, go into the chamber where the animalization ray device is, and they destroy it, which undoes the force field and turns all the Kids Next Door operatives back into humans. Later on, we're now at the Kids Next Door moon base, and the Sector V operatives are sad to hear from number 362 that there's no way to reinstate Tommy into the... they can't reinstate Tommy into the Kids Next Door organization, even after what he's done for them. Number 4 in particular is outraged by this, and he threatens to quit the Kids Next Door himself, but no one present really takes his threat seriously. And number 362 explains that it's a fail-safe of the computer to forbid a Kids Next Door operative who quit from re-entering the Kids Next Door. Or yeah, if a booger of an operative is taken out of the code module, they can't re-put it in because it's a fail-safe. It was done to ensure that any teenage operatives, or yes, the purpose of the fail-safe was to prevent any teenage operatives from hacking into the Kids Next Door global organization computer. So unfortunately, there isn't any way for them to make an exception for Tommy, but Tommy actually is okay with this. He's now Tommy is now wearing gloves, a hat, and a cape, and he's now calling himself the Tommy. And he says that he'll be an ally for the Kids Next Door. If he can't be a Kids Next Door operative anymore, he'll at least be willing to help the Kids Next Door out whenever they need his help. So Tommy uses a 2x4 technology vehicle that he created to leave the moon base after he makes his big speech about being the Tommy to return to Earth. And the other Kids Next Door operatives present can't help but chuckle over how Tommy is very much the younger brother of number 2, and the episode ends with number 2 not really understanding what they mean by this. So this is the third and last full episode of season 3, and this is also a good example of what I would consider to be a heavy hitter episode of Codename Kids Next Door. So to clarify, for me, a heavy hitter episode of Codename Kids Next Door is a full episode within one of the 6 seasons of Codename Kids Next Door that play an important role in the grand scheme of the main storyline of the series. Now, I'm not counting the TV specials or the TV movie when I consider a heavy hitter episode, but full episodes, 1 per season. For most of the seasons, I would consider the season finale to be the heavy hitter episode, but in the case of season 3 and season 4, season 3 and season 4 are the only seasons for Codename Kids Next Door where the season finale is not a full episode. They just have the A segment, B segment episodes as their season finales, season 3 and 4. So in the case of season 3, I would consider Operation Graduates to be the heavy hitter episode of season 3. And that's because this concludes the storyline that was most prominently featured within season 3, Tommy becoming a Kids Next Door operative, but also the storyline about Father's plan with the Kids Next Door code module. And without giving too much else away, this episode also leads into another heavy hitter episode. We'll cross that bridge eventually, but yeah, there is more to this episode. But yes, this episode did conclude Tommy graduating into the Kids Next Door, and we do find out that Father's plan involved taking the code module so that he could modify it to be in sync with his animalization array, and that's why he intentionally wanted them to have it back so he could set his plan into motion. And yeah, Father's plan to turn the Kids Next Door operatives into animals was definitely a cunning plan. Some fans would argue that this is Father's peak of villainy because there are some fans that feel Father was hit with villain decay or diminishing villain threat after this episode. Although there are some entries in the series that some fans would argue Father would be just as threatening or just as at his peak of villainy as well. So some fans would say Father was hit with villain decay after this episode, but others would argue that there are other entries where Father is in top form of villainy like he is here. The series finale in particular, I know a lot of fans seem to be willing to there seem to be many fans that are at least willing to agree that the series finale is where Father is fully out of his villain decay. Although I guess it's worth pointing out, even when he's hit with villain decay, Father is still the most dangerous of the enemies that the Kids Next Door face, not counting the one villain who does exceed Father on the villain hierarchy. That villain still hasn't been introduced just yet, and we will talk about that villain eventually. But yes, not counting that particular villain, Father is still considered the most dangerous of the villains, even when he's hit with villain decay. And to be fair, even Father's first appearance, Operation Grow Up, did show Father's more humorous side. Father had his humorous moments in that episode, and he has his humorous moments here and earlier entries that he appeared in as well. But yeah, even though Father might be hit with villain decay, and even if he does have more humorous moments, he's still overall one of the more dangerous enemies. Really, only one other villain exceeds him in threat, and we will talk about that villain eventually. But yes, the other important detail with this episode is, although Tommy does get to become a Kids Next Door operative, it doesn't last by the end of the episode. Tommy ends up quitting the Kids Next Door in order to stop Father's plan. And as number 362 explained, they can't put him back into the Kids Next Door because of a failsafe to prevent teens that were Kids Next Door operatives from hacking into the computers to cause trouble. So unfortunately, that failsafe prevented Tommy from coming back to the Kids Next Door. And some fans were disappointed by that, but other fans thought the idea of Tommy becoming an occasional ally as the Tommy actually was a pretty good idea. So the status quo still changes, even though Tommy doesn't stay in the Kids Next Door organization. The status quo still changes with him becoming an ally for the Kids Next Door as an alternative. And we will go into, we will get to see more of Tommy as the Tommy. We will see Tommy still will get some prevalent roles later on, even though he's no longer a Kids Next Door operative. And we will get to see him as an ally for the Kids Next Door here and there in future entries. So, yeah, you can expect to see more of Tommy, even if he's not going to be a Kids Next Door operative. And some would say it was pretty heartwarming how number 4 in particular was actually outraged by Tommy not being able to re-enter the Kids Next Door organization. And some think it might also be a reference to the fact that D. Bradley Baker voices both Tommy and number 4. Maybe it was, who knows? I wouldn't be surprised if it was also a reference to that. But yes, oh, that's right. Yes, we should talk about number 362. Yes, number 274 was the supreme leader for the Kids Next Door during the first 2 seasons, but after his betrayal in the season 2 finale, that left the question of who was going to take over as the supreme leader. And yes, the answer has officially been given in this episode. Number 362 is now the supreme leader after number 274's betrayal. And number 362 first appeared in Operation Fugitive, the same segment that also introduced number 86. So yes, you could say number 362 was an ascended extra. She only had a brief appearance in Operation Fugitive, but she goes on to become an important recurring role starting in this episode going forward in the series as the new Supreme Leader. And yes, some fans thought it would have been nice if we had got to see more of number 362 as a spy before she became the Supreme Leader, but yeah, number 362 does become a very popular character with many fans, and yeah, I'm inclined to agree as well. I think number 362 might be my favorite non-Sector V operative in the series, so... But yes, we will get to see more of number 362 in the future, and there is actually a full episode. It's another heavy hitter episode in the series where number 362 gets the spotlight. And that actually relates to, that's the same episode that also is affected by events from this episode. Because yes, let's just say Tommy's way of stopping the Delightful Children and Father by making them Kids Next Door operatives so they'd be affected by the animalization ray. Let's just say that there are some other consequences to those actions. That's the hint I'll give for those just following along with the recap and thoughts videos. But yes, the actions of Tommy in this episode do carry over into a later heavy hitter episode. So we'll go into greater detail about that. I guess the other important detail to talk about is the Delightful Children being affected by the animalization ray after Tommy placed their boogers into the code module, because a later entry does add some confusion about this. I don't want to give too much away just yet for those just following along with the recap and thoughts videos, but it does make people question why the Delightful Children were only affected after Tommy's actions, and some fans do have some speculation about that, and I'll bring that up once we eventually reach the recap and thoughts video for that particular entry. So rest assured, we will offer some theories, hypothesis, speculation, whatever you want to call it, about that particular detail, but we will go into greater detail about that later on. So hang in there, be patient is all I can request for now. But yes, that was definitely on the longer side, but understandably so. This was definitely one of the more important entries within the series. And like I said, it does carry over into other entries as well. Yes, other entries also are affected by this entry too. And otherwise, yes, like I said, this is the last full episode of Season 3, so the last the last 4 episodes of Season 3 are A-B segment episodes. So, yeah, you can expect so the heavy hitter episode of Season 3 happened before the end of the season. But the other segments still provide something important, or the rest of Season 3 still have some important details, and we'll be sure to cover them as we eventually cross those bridges. But yes, otherwise, I'd say that's about it for... Or actually, I guess one more detail is we will go on to see Sonya and Lee. Yes, Sonya and Lee weren't really too important in this episode, but they do go on to appear in later entries, and they stay Kids Next Door operatives. That's actually what I was alluding to when I said Sonya and Lee wouldn't get to interact with Tommy too much afterwards, because Tommy's not a Kids Next Door operative anymore. But yes, Sonya and Lee do go on to stay as Kids Next Door operatives. You'll see more of them in the future. But otherwise, yes, now I'd say that we've covered all the bases that I feel are necessary for this particular episode. So there we go. As of this video, we've now discussed episode 35 of Codename Kids Next Door on this channel. Take care, and until next time.